I'm Eric Landstrom. Joining us on this broadcast of Interstellar Transmissions, Commander Malcolm Scott Carpenter grew up with a vibrant frontier tradition of exploration, descended from a family of early Colorado pioneers and ascending into outer space. Carpenter is one of the 7 original astronauts with what author Tom Wolfe described as the right stuff. As the backup to John Glenn, Carpenter followed him to become the second American in orbit on May 24, 1962. He went to explore the oceans, commanding the underwater teams in the U.S. Navy's Man in the Sea program during Sea Lab 2. It is my great pleasure to introduce a Navy pilot during 2 wars, a Mercury astronaut, and a pioneering underwater explorer, Scott Carpenter.
And it is his pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight. How's it feel to be back in Florida?
Great. I love this country.
I do have to admit, though, you're bringing a bit of a cold snap with you, which is very atypical for this time of year. Although I'd like to say for being around in Florida, you're going to be tomorrow down in Broward County, correct?
Correct.
You are going to be down at the Broward Community College Omni Auditorium, which is at 1100 Coconut Creek Boulevard, for a free presentation to discuss your newly published autobiography with your daughter, For Spacious Skies, The Uncommon Journey of a Mercury Astronaut.
And if I may say so, it's a good book.
I think so, too. I've enjoyed reading it. What has made you decide to write your autobiography at this point?
I've wanted for 4 or 5 decades to write about my father figure, who was my maternal grandfather, and I finally got started on it. My daughter was instrumental in that. She was tired of not seeing this story in print. It's her family, too. So by virtue of shackles and leg irons, she got me started, and we started to work together, and that was a great pleasure, working with your daughter on a joint project like this.
What sort of stories did she find out about you that she didn't know growing up?
Well, an awful lot came from family archives, notably my mother's letters to my father. They were separated by her tuberculosis, and those letters were and are magnificent. And through the story that they told, it seems that my mother turned out in the book a greater hero than my grandfather, which pleases me greatly.
Although I find it very interesting as I read about your relationship with your wife, Renee, that endured some incredible hardships on its own, and how did your daughter react to finding out about how that bond of love kept you while you were in the military?
Sure, but, military families have difficulties like that, and we survived that. But, some people grow apart, some grow together. Our relationship failed because of the former, but we're still good friends.
Let's talk about your astronaut career. I know that you were very, very good friends with John Glenn, being his backup pilot in 1962. You worked with him in those respects, and I know that you still have a very good friendship with John Glenn, so much to the point that in 1999 for STS-95, you were there at the Cape in support of him being involved on the space shuttle launch. What was it like being friends with a group of people that obviously you saw each other as ordinary Joes, but the rest of the world saw you as being on the shoulders of giants?
Well, we had a special bond, John and I, but all 7 of us had a bond. That fraternity was and remains unique, at least in this country. It might be equaled by the cosmonauts in what was once the Soviet Union. John and I had a particularly strong bond, and the flight you mentioned, his second in the shuttle, I told him that I would be glad to stand by for him, but this time I'd make sure he broke his leg so I could take the flight. He was studying the effects of weightlessness on aging and aged people. So after I offered to be his backup again, I added that probably NASA wouldn't allow it anyway because I wasn't old enough.
I'm sorry, just for Florida, the thought of minimum age requirements in order to get to fly the shuttle is quite intriguing.
Indeed.
Speaking of flying into space, here's something that came across the wire today. China has announced its plans to fly the first manned Chinese mission in October of 2003 using their Shenzhou 5 capsule. Now, you were present at the birth of America's manned space flight. So, if you had to give advice to the Chinese about going into space, what from your own experience would you suggest to them?
Before I go into that, let me offer one other related idea. Competition between the Soviets and the Americans was a driving force for both of us on both sides of the Iron Curtain. We welcomed it. It made us do a better job. The Soviet Union no longer exists, and neither does the competition, so I would say at this point, welcome China. We need the competition because it will drive us. Sooner or later, they will be at a point where they will drive us as we have driven them. And I can't tell the Chinese what they should do. They have watched our space program just as carefully as we have. They know where they're going, and they know how to do it.
You know, that you mentioned that the Chinese watching us, the whole world was watching us as far back as when the announcement was made. Obviously, it was the exact opposite with the Russians, where we didn't know if they had successfully sent a man into space until he was shot up, did the orbit, and came back alive. Gosh knows how many might have went and died in the attempt before Yuri Gagarin. But in the case when you and the other 6 Mercury astronauts were named, you were under a microscope, an exclusive contract with Life magazine, not just for you and your 6 colleagues, but also for your wife Renee and also the other 6 wives. And of course, as Tom Wolfe had mentioned in The Right Stuff, the press being called the genteel beast. Basically just asking everything, what you thought and how you felt about certain things, and the scrutiny of all that. Obviously, it's kind of changed now, since basically it seems that taking a shuttle flight is just like taking a puddle jumper from Washington to Baltimore. But yet, that was a very exciting time, and I'm wondering for those who are getting involved in that, especially with the Chinese getting involved in their own ventures, how does one more or less prepare for that new sense of scrutiny that just might come again?
You don't prepare for that. You live with it when it happens. But the post-flight episode results in some stresses that the psychiatrist in the early days didn't expect. The loss of anonymity that follows space flight was difficult for a lot of people to take, but everybody survived, and you know it's a welcome thing to be able to have done something that this many people are interested in, and it is a special privilege to turn that experience into many opportunities to inspire kids.
Which is why I'm so glad that you have written this down in the new book for Spacious Skies, The Uncommon Journey of a Mercury Astronaut, written by our guest tonight on Interstellar Transmissions, Scott Carpenter. We'll be back with more questions for him after this brief commercial announcement.
Cracked Internet Services, cracked.com, spelled Kracked.com, is the official hosting service of Interstellar Transmissions. Cracked Internet Services offers reliable, inexpensive hosting services for your domain or virtual domain. Powered by Linux, their servers are dependable and stable for only $75 a year. Now, for that $75 a year, you get 50 megs of storage, unlimited FTP access, CGI bin, PHP implementation, 10 POP3 email accounts, and unlimited forwards in your domain. Or you can take advantage of their special offer and get all that for life for just $250. So visit Cracked Internet Services at cracked.com, Kracked.com, and get more information about some of their other services, including URL redirection and customized PHP and CGI programming. That's Cracked Internet Services, cracked.com, spelled with a K, or visit their link through interstellartransmissions.com.
There's not much time left to get on board the 2003 Sci-Fi Sea Cruise, leaving Los Angeles on February 10th and coming back to LA on February 14th in time for the 14th annual Gallifrey 1 convention. Some spaces are still available. For more information, check out the website members.aol.com/sfcruise. Dan Harris presents the 2003 Sci-Fi Sea Cruise.
You are listening to a broadcast of Interstellar Transmissions.
It's a miracle these people ever got out of the 20th century.
InterstellarTransmissions.com.
Straight from the pages of history, inspired by legends of yore, with fairies and dragons and fools, among falcons and owls you'll soar. There's jousting and jesting and sword fights, there's drama and singing of sorts, drinking with townfolk in 5 pubs, or dancing with royals at court. Crafts and wares, all handmade, like boots and hats and rings. Then there are swords and armor and relics, or dresses and fairy wings. Comedy, music and mayhem, a day full of much ado. Turkey legs and Scottish eggs, root